A little bit more about, all right, so we're talking about some circumstances where you have to understand that you're going to get involved in terms of due process. In terms of hiring, we already talked about the fact the superintendent recommends, and then you either support or you don't his or her recommendation. We get to discipline of student cases. A superintendent can only suspend a student up to 10 days. Neither a building principal nor a superintendent can go beyond the 10 days with a student. If there's going to be any disciplinary action of a student beyond that 10 days, then that hearing has to come in front of the school committee or a subcommittee of that committee. And when it comes in front of the committee, then you're making a decision as to what you're going to do with that child. This is where the General Assembly has issued a statute and kind of made your life a little bit difficult. When I was a superintendent 100 years ago, we could throw kids out. Kid misbehaved, you know what, you're gone, we're done, go find yourself an education somewhere else. Several years ago, the General Assembly put in a statute that said, if you're going to suspend a student for more than 10 days, then you have to put that child in an alternate program. So if you have a child, as Ben said, the captain of the football team gets caught with drugs in school, and you have a no-tolerance policy, and we're putting that kid out for the you as a school committee are voting to put that child out for the remainder of the school year, you have to find an alternate program and pay for that alternate program for that child. And again, that's where you get involved in the discipline, and that's where your superintendent brings you a recommendation. In terms...
Can I start it and then you finish?
Go ahead.
Another thing that we've seen, which is really bizarre in special ed cases, we've seen school committee people develop a relationship with parents of special ed kids, and they show up at IEP meetings and actually start to advocate for the kids. It's a phenomenon that's happened increasingly. We don't understand why it happens because school committees are not involved in special ed issues like this. Extraordinarily dangerous for the district. But it does happen. It can create a ton of liability. Just imagine if you have someone who's a representative of the school district that doesn't belong on an IEP team, and he or she's advocating for a benefit that can cost the district an extra $100,000. And also imagine if that child is in the first grade, and you're probably responsible for them at least through 21, if not 22 years of age, and the impact that that could have.
Basically, with our special education cases, this doesn't even go to the superintendent and then the school committee. If there are issues in special education cases, the special ed director is usually handling it with a team within one of the schools. And then if the parents disagree with that decision, their due process rights is to take it to hearing through a hearing officer that's appointed to RIDE. So any special ed appeals don't go to the superintendent and they don't go to you. They go to a hearing officer, a due process hearing officer that is appointed at RIDE. The only time I get my school committees involved in special ed is if we as a district, if myself, the superintendent, and the special ed director are trying to settle a case, and then I'm going to bring the information to the school committee and say, will you agree to this settlement? It isn't something a team that's come up with. It's something that we've worked on to try to keep us out of litigation and to make the situation go away. But in terms of any appeals of special ed matters, that is not something that a school committee gets involved in because that goes to actually to a RIDE hearing officer that would take that appeal. So try to stay out of special ed. People are going to hear that you're now on the committee, especially the new people. Oh, my child, the IEP that the child has, it's not given FAPE. I want the child placed at the Wolf School. I want the child placed here, there, or wherever. Those kinds of phone calls you need to say, refer back to the special ed director. Because you're only going to get yourself and the district in trouble if you try to get involved.
Another point, too.
There's a question. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Can everybody, can you hear me okay? In Warwick, we have 1,600 IEPs. So we have the problems that come up occasionally, perhaps even more so. Now, if RIDE comes back and gets involved in one of those, can anyone on the school committee be involved at that point? No. Then who is involved if the case comes back before us?
Let me ask you another question. I'm going to give you the microphone back. What do you mean, if a case goes to a parent has a problem, they file for due process. It's called a due process hearing at RIDE. There's a hearing officer appointed, and now the matter is in due process. So your question is, can the school committee get involved at that point?
What comes back to us is just to our attorney, our legal counsel, and a superintendent, or can we get involved in any other way?
It's not going to come back to you unless there's a settlement that's being attempted and you're going to have to make a decision based on whether something is going to happen. That would be the only time it would come back to you. While the hearing is going on itself, there's no involvement of the superintendent or the school committee. Does that answer your question?
Who else is besides Ryan?
Who else? If a case goes to due process, maybe that's the way to answer it. If a case goes to due process, the Rhode Island Department of Education hires a hearing officer who's been trained to hear the case. The parent and the parent's attorney represents the parent and the child. Your district special ed attorney represents the district, and the case goes to hearing. Once the case goes to hearing, there is a decision. At that point, if you've possibly lost, it might come to the school committee as to whether we're going to appeal that loss. I would bring that kind of question to my school committee. If you've won and the parent now appeals, there may be an attempt to settle at that point. I would always bring that kind of question back to the committee. Does that answer you? Okay. Go ahead, Ben.
Like I said,
We're having a lot of special ed cases around the state. I'm just telling you, we're in due process every day lately.